All right, so welcome back from lunch. I hope you enjoy the chili and cornbread and other yummy stuff. This session is called Communicating with Clients About Green, in quotes. A panel of practitioners, and we have a nice range of folks to represent sort of how this communication works or doesn't. I mean, you're free to say when it didn't or doesn't and what kind of things you have qualms about, because we're just trying to provoke a thought process here. I'm going to go through everybody's introduction and sort of who they are so they can talk smoothly then. So I'm going to do 4 little introductions here. Starting with Jen Monroe, who is a colleague of mine. She works with the Community Power Network and her own company, a women-owned company, Adirondack Efficiency. That's a home energy auditing business based in the southern Adirondacks, and she works with a BPI accredited contractor called Innovation Now, and they do energy audits and retrofits through NYSERDA's Home Performance and Empower programs. And the reason I wanted Jen on this panel is because she has a unique setup that I haven't seen any other home performance contractor do that is very client focused. She and the Community Power Network part of her and I and the Wild Center have been working together on energy efficiency projects for a couple years. And next then we have Karen Totino, who's the owner of Green Conscience in Saratoga Springs, who got her formal education from Russell Sage College with a master's in occupational therapy. She started an organic lawn company and then transitioned it into a finishing store, showroom, and offers bedding, natural bedding, organic bedding, and she educates people in the process of their buying these products for their home. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm a showroom. I'll go into a little bit about what I do, but yes, I have a showroom, and so primarily interior finished products.
And Karen can answer more questions at her table in the vendor hall afterwards. Steve Amstutz is a timber framer. Let me get to the official part of it here. He has a degree in anthropology and a 25-year career in timber framing throughout the Adirondacks and the Northeast. His homes are very energy efficient because they do an exterior wrap of insulation and do a thermal break between the interior conditioned space from the exterior. They consistently exceed the New York State Energy Code by 15 to 25%. And they try and use local products. And he's my neighbor. And last but certainly not least, Jesse Schwartzberg. Sorry, I should have put these in the order. Jesse is the founder of Black Mountain Design Build, a green design and consulting firm based out of Saranac Lake, where he contributes to residential and commercial projects throughout the Adirondacks and beyond. He provides clients with guidance through the design and construction process, striving for continuity, beauty, and efficiency. Jesse has a master's degree in architecture from the University of Oregon and a bachelor's in earth science. He's a LEED accredited professional and certified passive house consultant. And he's taking architectural exams. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. Jen is the only one who has a PowerPoint. They're going to each speak for about 6 or 7 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A. I don't know if you want to be interrupted with questions along the way, or should we wait till the end, probably, so everybody gets a chance to speak. Without further ado.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Monroe, and
Right up.
I hate microphones. my company is Adirondack Efficiency, and I do home energy audits, like Kara said, with a BPI accredited company called Innovation Now. And this all came about, like Kara said, we were working on a project called SEAM, which is Community Energy Efficiency Management, which is really doing outreach at a municipal level and letting people know about all the different programs that are available, because there are many NYSERDA programs out there, but people don't always know where to turn and what the right fit is for them. So through that process, it became obvious that there were not enough BPI-accredited contractors to do the work in the Adirondacks, especially the southern Adirondacks. BPI is Building Performance Institute, and that's the accreditation that NYSERDA requires in order to implement their home performance and empower programs. So my role has been doing the customer outreach and then hand-holding all the way through the whole process, because there are great programs, but they're very complicated, and there's a lot of details, and it's a lot for a homeowner to figure out as they're walking through. So I've been the one point of contact, from the time they fill out their audit application, through all of the whole process. Talking to, my part of green is solely energy efficiency, but it's almost more than talking about energy efficiency. It's navigating the NYSERDA programs for people. That's the main part of my job. How do I change?
Oh,
I got it. Okay. So why do I do it? This is the main reason. New York State homes waste on average 25% of the energy they purchase. And in the Adirondacks, it's even higher than that. And it's kind of mind-boggling, because if you were wasting 25% of another product, people would be up in arms. If you had to dump out a quarter of your gallon of milk every time you bought it, or, pay for however many gallons of gas and only get 75% of that, people would be furious. But somehow with home energy, they just don't think about it, or it's just, they don't realize they're wasting it. So that's why I do what I do. There's a huge need here, and just a lack of contractors willing to, getting accredited is the first step, but there's just a lot of hoops to jump through in order to get to the point where they can deliver these programs. Now, how many people have had a home energy audit done? Good. And how many people have had work done through a NYSERDA project? 2, 3, yay. So the home energy audit, first of all, people don't even know what that is. You say energy efficiency, and your average homeowner kind of stares at you blankly. So the first step is just explaining what an energy audit is. And we're looking at the whole house. The house is a system, and we're in every nook and cranny of your home. It can be an intrusive process. We're in the attic, we're in the basement, and we're every point in between. A lot of times air leaks are in places that people don't always look at, like the inside of closets. They're not always finished, so we're poking in closets, opening up vanities underneath sinks, and nothing sacred. So, some people take that better than others. And everybody apologizes about the condition of their basement. It's just, not somewhere where you're used to having people in their home. So we do the visual inspection, which is looking at insulation primarily, and then any moisture issues. There's a lot of moisture issues in basements around here. Testing combustion equipment, and then the air leakage. We use a blower door. So many people think the blower door measures insulation. It does not. It measures air leakage. So it's just explaining what these things even are, because it's a foreign concept to most people. And then also the health and safety is important, especially once you start tightening a home up. You want to make sure the combustion appliances can still draft properly and that there's no CO issues in the house. Building science basics, we got an overview this morning. These are the 2 key points that we like to make sure homeowners understand at the time of the audit. The building envelope, the continuous and uninterrupted thermal and air barrier, and that's another one where people kind of look at you blankly. They don't realize that fiberglass insulation is a thermal barrier, but air can still pass through it. And the analogy I finally came up with to make this clear is you're wearing a nice heavy wool sweater. You're warm. You go outside, it's a windy day. That wind is still going through your nice warm sweater, so you need your windbreaker on top of your sweater. So that is your air barrier. The thermal barrier is the sweater, and that's had a lot of light bulbs go off for people, so I'll keep using it. And then the stack effect, everybody says heat rises. Heat doesn't really rise. It's the warm air that's rising, and it's physics. It's going to rise up and try to find its way out of the top of the house and be made up with air coming in from the low point. It's just the way it is. I've had people try to argue with me or not understand. They want to insulate their basement, but they don't want to insulate their attic. And they think, well, that's where the cold air comes in. That should be good enough, right? We're stopping the cold air coming in. But if it's still going to rise up through the house and escape out the top, you're only solving half of the problem, and you really have to look at the house as a whole. So, I had one customer just was refusing to believe that that wasn't going to solve all his problems, just attacking the bottom of the house. So, we like to say you want to put the hat and the boots on the building. The jacket is kind of the final step, if any wall insulation, but you definitely want to insulate and air seal the attic and the basement, especially the rim joists. Where the house sits on the foundation is the prime location for air coming in, the cold air coming in at the bottom. And a lot of times you have people shove fiberglass in the rim joists, and a lot of times it's the homeowners doing that themselves, and it's a valiant effort, but it's not an air barrier. So you're insulating, and it can get kind of delicate telling the homeowner, sorry, what you did is wrong, and we're going to take it all out and redo it. But usually they will understand. There's no building science 101 that people, encounter. So this is usually a foreign concept at the time we come in for the audit. And this is another foreign concept. In most cases, energy savings pay for improvements. So especially with the NYSERDA programs, the savings have to pay for the improvements. So let's say we do the retrofit, we cut your oil bill by $50 a month. Your loan payment would be less than $50 a month. So theoretically, no more money is leaving the homeowner's pocket every month. And that's a hard sell. People don't often believe that they're really going to save energy, and you can show them the numbers, and then it's like, well, how do you know it works? We plug everything into a modeling software. I don't know what the little elves in there do to make it spit out numbers, but I'm pretty confident that, it works. And once I've been doing this for about 1.5 years, so the first jobs that were completed are just about at a year point. So I started collecting the post-usage data from people, but it wasn't showing, so I could compare the year before they had the retrofits done with the year after. But last year was such a warmer winter that, it wasn't a really good comparison. So people are still using less this year, but it's not as noticeable because it's been so much colder. So have to figure out how to convert that to heating degree days and compare apples to apples, but that's for another day. And when I come back to present the findings from the energy audit, you'll have a prioritized list of each measure. You insulate your attic, it's going to cost you this much, it will save you this much a year, and it will give you a savings to investment ratio. And that SIR is how people can prioritize which measures to implement. But the last bullet, comfort doesn't have an SIR. That really seems to be the motivating factor for people is, it's great that they're saving money. It's great that they're reducing carbon emissions and, promoting green local jobs and blah, blah, blah. But what they notice is it's a consistent temperature throughout my house now. And that's what people like. And I know in my own house, I had attic insulation put in finally the beginning of this year. And now the upstairs of the house is the warmest place instead of the coldest place. And I've sweated my poor 10-year-old out of his bedroom, but he came down the first night, Mama, it's too hot up there. I need water. So it really does make a difference. But again, that comfort doesn't have an SIR. You can't, and other major purchases don't pay for themselves ever. You buy a new car, and that is not going to pay for itself. You get granite countertops, and they're not paying for themselves ever. So I don't know why with energy efficiency, that is the focus. It's wonderful that they pay for themselves, but there's benefits above and beyond dollar savings that people get out of energy efficiency retrofits. And here's an example. Tree is the modeling software that we use for the home performance program. So this is a sample. This is actually a real customer, a job starting next week, and the report that he saw. So it shows the costs and the savings for each measure, the number of years of the payback period, both for each measure and then for the entire package, and then the SIR, which is how many times it's going to pay for itself over the life of the measures. So this was a very attractive package and was actually, usually people take a while to chew over the report and try to figure out, what makes sense for them to do, which doesn't always have to do with money again. But this household, looked at it, understood it right away, signed the proposal, and even then, going through the NYSERDA program, it's been 3 months since he signed the proposal, and work is just beginning. So it's not a quick process, and that's how I, preface all of these. Nothing is going to happen quickly, so you have to be patient. because there's time to develop the report, and then if you're going through the NYSERDA programs, you have to apply for, they offer financing, and you have to apply for the financing. And so that gets approved by one entity, and then the work scope gets gone over by a fine-tooth comb, and by another entity, and then those get merged, and then we finally get the notice to proceed. So they're valuable programs, but there's nothing quick or simple about them. And that is my speed version of what I do. How'd I do for time? All right.
Hi. Thanks, Jen. So I'm going to give slightly different presentation and angle than Jen, and it's kind of perfect that I think that I'm going after her because, well, first, my name is Karen, and I own Green Conscience. Before you heard a little bit about what I do, but my focus, people are coming to see me oftentimes because they have a concern about the health and well-being of themselves and their family. So I have a showroom. I do interior finishes with the theme being sustainability and non-toxic. I'm going to talk a little bit less about what my products are and what they do, but actually what the process is for when people come in and talk to me and what that looks like and how I navigate through that communication process. And, you know, I have people that are coming in at the very beginning or conceptual stages of a project or right before they need something. So ideally, you know, they're coming in at the beginning and thinking through the process and have a well thought out plan to execute. But like I said, I think the most important thing about communicating green is actually being a good listener. So the first thing I do is try to ask as many engaging questions as I can so I can get a foundation of what that person's understanding is, what their level is, like how much do they know about what they're actually talking about, and also what is their motivation? You know, is their motivation comfort? Is their motivation a return on investment? I mean, because green means so many different things. So what does green mean to them? And sometimes they don't even know. And so it's a process of helping them discover what it is, helping them hone into what is important to them. Sometimes they come in with a very clear objective and a clear vision, and sometimes it's confusing. They're confused. So it's crystallizing their vision, understanding what their motivation is, and going from there. And in that process, I am also able to, so they have, you know, an objective, something that they want to do, but they also have, I find, a lot of fear and anxiety, right? So they're like, well, you know, I want to do this green project, but, you know, I don't know, I've heard this and I've heard that. And so there's a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation, and myths about green building and green building products. So part of that process is accurately educating them, dispelling some of the myths, and thereby easing their anxiety. So that is really important when you're communicating green to a client, is to understand their motivations, understand their fears, their anxieties, and, you know, then their fears and anxieties could be justified. They could be real, you know. Well, yeah, no, I can't afford that, or that isn't the best application for this project. So those are two key points: is listening, understanding their goals, crystallizing their goals, dispelling easing their anxieties, and then actually helping them come up with a plan, and then also not realizing that I don't have to have all the answers, is, you know, helping them find the next person, you know, who can help them. So I get a lot of questions on areas that I'm not an expert in. I'm not an expert in energy efficiency or geothermal systems, or but I know someone who can help them. So sometimes I'm a point place, just a place to come, get education, get some information, and get contacts. So that didn't take 6 minutes, but I want to have enough time because I want I want to have time for this panel to engage with the audience. So I'm going to pass this along now to Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Amstutz, Timber Framing, and I wanted to talk a bit about how the process we work through and have worked through for years. We get a lot of work from architects we know and from builders that we know, but we also get a lot of work that just comes to us because of our publicity or whatever. So I find that I enter very early into a project, a house, a barn, we're mostly talking houses here, with clients, and I find that's really advantageous. And I also usually give clients my little spiel about how, what is it going to take for you to want to hire us? Let's figure that out, because once you hire us, you've got us and everybody else we work with on your team. So whether it be a bidding process or a budget process or just, an establishment of credentials, when we get to that point where we're on the same team with the client, then things really start to happen in a nice way. And anybody that's been building for a long time, as I have, we have a lot of resources. It's part of what we do. We have connections with engineers, architects, materials, et cetera. So I like to get involved in the design process early. And we used to do more in-house design. We're not architects, but we have designed many smaller houses. And we've worked with a lot of wonderful architects and designers. And so I end up being in this situation where I often help the client navigate what they want, both in terms of design and then specifically in terms of green. And I think in the early years when I was started building timber frames back in the early 90s, I think I spent an exorbitant amount of time trying to convince people they wanted timber frames. And somewhere in the mid-90s that changed, and I guess we got better known, and we found it was much easier to sell timber frames to people that already wanted them. So we gave up on trying to convince people they wanted timber frames, and we went looking for people who wanted timber frames. And then we could really talk turkey about how we could do what they wanted or how we could help them get their vision become manifest. So, the design process, a lot of this is I end up being an interface between the designer and the client. And obviously I have my own opinions about what I think is good design, and I try to articulate that. So design dictates cost, design dictates everything regarding the project. We spend a lot of time trying to site the project. We spend a lot of time talking about, what they want this house to be for them. And then in the context of that, we can address issues like green, building. Intrinsically, what we build scores high on certain aspects of green. For example, we score very high on energy efficiency by virtue of the fact that we use stress-kin panels. There's not a stress-kin panel manufacturer here. Sometimes there have been. But for those of you that don't know what SIPs are, SIPs stands for Structural Insulated Panel System. And what it is it's like an ice cream sandwich of oriented strand board or plywood, foam insulation, and then oriented strand board. All three are intrinsically floppy materials. Glue them together, they're structurally solid like an I-beam. And we basically build a timber frame and then we wrap the whole structure with these panels. So we have no air infiltration. We have very little thermal bridging because we don't have studs that go through insulation except around windows and doors. And we start insulating at the top of the foundation. So we've talked in this other sessions about rim joists and attics and eaves. We don't have those details that are problematic for insulation. So our houses score very high when we put them through a res check type analysis. And clients who are interested in building green, this is a huge sales point. They enjoy that very much. Needless to say, I spend a fair bit of time directing people towards good windows and those sorts of things that are key. I'm focusing here on the envelope. To me, I think a key way to help your client build green is to convince them to build a very energy efficient house. The corollary of that is size. And if you visit our website, you'll see that we built everything from itty-bitty, 800 square feet, to many thousands of square feet. And I have to say that there's some magic number in there in size, beyond which it doesn't seem very green to me. I don't know where that number is specifically, somewhere in the 2,000 to 3,000 square foot range, perhaps. But anyway, so we like it best when the clients come to us with an orientation towards wanting a house that's in that sort of medium size. And then we can really sort of help them navigate the issue of green and how they're going to build this house that will be green. I feel like there's so many wonderful products out there, and yet it's very challenging to pick the proper product for the right client. And that becomes something that I'm not an expert at. I'll pass that on to somebody else when it comes down to heating systems and other and finishes and so forth. But when it comes to the gross structure, the envelope, and all of those things. That's a skill set that I have that I think is very good. So good design, we work with that. That's pretty important. I've already addressed the issue of energy efficiency, the size. And we've never done a net zero house. I went down to Massachusetts a few years back. This is an aside for the NESE conference, great conference if anybody's interested. Northeast Sustainable Energy Association every year in March. And I went down to see what it would take to turn one of our houses into a net zero house. And I figured out that basically we had to not double our insulation, but add about 50% more of our value. So I'm waiting for the client to come along and says, I want a net zero timber frame. But they haven't come yet. To me, a big issue that we push, and it's advantageous for us, and also it fits our timber frames, is the idea of local. We do a lot of timber frame construction using white pine. We've used most local hardwoods, most local species. We've used white cedar, hemlock. We use red oak, white oak. We've used cherry throughout our projects. As timber framers, we're working with wood in a relatively natural state. Squared up, but it's a big piece of wood. So the amount of energy it takes to go from the tree in the forest to the timber, there's not a lot of production. It doesn't have to pass through a factory first. Oftentimes, we're buying timber that's coming from only 20 miles away, harvested by people we know that are good. And so this is a real appeal to clients, and we explain this to them. What really gets kind of interesting is in the last, I think the first time we did it was probably in the late 90s, but we've done it many times now where we log the site. That site is bought, often woodland up here, needs to be cleared, and we've been able to get from these various sites anywhere from 1/3 to 60% of the timber. And that's a wonderful thing for clients. They have a direct connection to the forest that produced their house. They're living in that forest. And, hearkening back to the first gentleman's speech here about, how we used to know how to build green, but don't anymore, we feel like we're heading back in the right direction when we do that. Also, the Adirondacks is a great place for local materials. We've got some great mills that produce high-quality paneling and other materials, hardwoods for cabinet work, et cetera. So we try to really push the local idea. And the local idea is good for a lot of reasons, and I think the clients really enjoy this. It's good because transportation costs are way down. We're not bringing timber in from the West Coast. We do that, but if we can build with local timber, we prefer to. We're not bringing in, sustainably yielded bamboo flooring from Vietnam. And we don't have to deal with the fact that there's an awful lot of energy in terms of transportation getting here. And also, from a green point of view, if we buy from our local people, we're promoting local business. We're promoting local economy, and that's huge. It's my preference to buy as much as possible as a builder from my local sawmills and local lumber companies around here. I think the other thing that we speak to a lot with our clients in terms of communication and green is this concept of longevity. I know that, I've had the fortune to take down a number of timber frame buildings that are, probably the oldest was in 1810, and move it and re-erect it. And nothing would make me feel, more justified in my work than to have someone in 200 years take down one of our buildings and move it and use it for something else. And this is very possible with timber framing. So we're building for the long haul. And that's a huge green attribute. And clients really latch onto that. The notion that this house, if properly maintained, good roof, good foundation, no moisture problems, if properly maintained, can last for a couple hundred years. Europe is full of timber frames that are 600-800 years old. Japan longer. So that's I think timber framing intrinsically lets clients look at the longevity of buildings in a different way. And this we find is very interesting for clients. I could go a lot farther, but I've run out of time here. I will add just one more thing, and that is, as a builder who's been involved in building for over 30 years, we builders tend to be conservative by nature. And by that I mean we tend to want to do things that we know are tried and true and tested. All the new technologies that are available out there and that are being demonstrated here are wonderful, but until they really have good testing and are proven, perhaps as builders we're a bit skeptical of that. And I think that's sometimes I'm concerned that in my interaction with clients I'm too conservative. I'm perhaps not willing enough to try new technologies. All of which is to say there's got to be a balance in there somewhere. But as a builder working with clients, I think it's my job to also be a healthy skeptic of products and bring 30-plus years of experience to the table and say, okay, this might work, but let's look at it from a different perspective. So I guess I'll end there. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. My name's Jesse Schwartzberg. My business is Black Mountain Design Build. It's a design and consulting business in Saranac Lake. And this is a really interesting topic on, it really comes down to communication and doing great work. To me, green it's a topic where no matter what type of work you're doing, no matter what you're trying to do, we all want to do things well. And you need a good team to do that. So, I've recently worked with Steve and Karen. I haven't worked with Jen yet, but I hope to. And that really comes down to getting the right people together to do the job that you need to do. One thing I will say is, and Steve touched on this, I do not convince clients to be green. Like that, I think it's a mistake. I educate clients on what they're interested in. If they're interested in something, I'm passionate about green building. I'm interested in doing things that are new and innovative or tried and true. Sure. I'm interested in doing things that are innovative or tried and true, but you need to educate people. And by people, I mean clients. And I can't emphasize that enough. It really is all about the client. And I think anyone who's whether they're in green building or not, or they're getting into it. If you're doing work as a builder, as an architect, as a consultant, anywhere, you have to take care of the client. You have to provide the client with what they need. And as Karen mentioned, sometimes they come into it. Sometimes they want everything, and sometimes they're really interested in one aspect of it. So I think really understanding what they're looking for, not convincing someone, hey, you should is not. That's just not an approach that I don't think it works in general in life, and it certainly doesn't work in green building. I rather than convince someone to do a timber frame, rather than convince someone to do a green project, I focus on bringing green to every project. And I'll take projects. Sometimes I'll come and add on to a team. There already be a contractor, an architect, and I'll come in and there's a client who's really interested in one aspect, and I'll do it. Another one, I'll be doing a smaller project, but I'll assemble the team, and I'll bring my network of connections and to get the client what you want. But it's always about education. It's always about information. And it's both cutting edge, and it's been happening this way forever. Just to give you a few examples of this. Well, one more thing I just want to mention is, the point of this conference is just by being here, you're showing an interest. You're showing that this is worth your time to be here and look at how could I be green? How could I get more involved? And I'd like to say any contractors or anyone in the room is just by being here, you can do it. It's not rocket science. You just have to team up with the right people. And I would just don't be daunted if you haven't done a green project or it's never been your MO. For whatever reason you're interested in it, if you want to do it, then just meet up with the right people, look around the room, and figure out who you're going to do projects with. If someone comes, so just some examples of energy. If someone's interested in energy, as Jen said, I might talk to them about the building orientation, the window overhangs. We might get into mechanical systems. All the stuff that we've heard a lot about today, that can be a topic. That's probably the most common thing that people are interested, I say, in green, is they think of energy. But it goes way beyond that. If it gets into net zero energy, then all of a sudden how do I produce the energy? How much energy, how much energy do I need to be net zero? How many solar panels do I need? Can I make, some people might be really interested in the sun, and getting solar hot water. You find the person, you find the person who knows about how to do that, and you get it done for the client. So I end up in the middle sort of the middle of everything more often than not. And so that's energy. If health and air quality, I might call Karen. Like there's green products. Like, hey, I have a client who, has an allergy, or they just want absolute zero VOC. What paints do you recommend, or what do you carry? What's the lead time? That kind of thing. Durability, again, I think Steve spoke to that, and local for that matter. Those are things that if someone says I want local wood, then maybe I'll recommend that. Do you like the aesthetic of timber framing? Does that appeal to you? Yeah. Oh, well, I know some timber framers. Let's go in that direction. Again, landscaping, a whole other world. Native plants, rain garden. There's some pavers on the screen earlier. Someone could come and be that's what they're interested in. They just want it to look like this house was just planted on their beautiful site and nothing ever happened. There's strategies for that. I won't go into too much more. I want to have time for questions, and just really curious about what your all experience is with talking to clients, or anything you want to ask for the four of us. Absolutely. I'll hand you the...
About education, and that is huge. But what we're doing is our passion, the passion that we have is inspiration. So, your energy catches, when you may not have someone totally sold on timber framing, but your education and your enthusiasm does play a part into energizing someone, or taking someone who's got a little bit of interest, and all of a sudden, now that you've provided that education combined with some passion, all of a sudden that can have a dramatic impact on a client and the way they think about and approach a project. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah.
Yeah. I've been having a year-long argument with a colleague about if what I do is sales or not, and I firmly believe it is not. I'm not, even though I am kind of selling a job for a contractor, but my role in it is not sales. And I think that's where a lot of the home performance contractors go at this more for sales. They're selling whatever they're already doing, where since I'm not the actual contractor, I can look at it more comprehensively and really take the time to explain everything to the homeowner, show them where the savings are going to be. And it's a slightly different approach. It's definitely more educating. And it's been working, so I guess it doesn't really matter what you call it, but the education component is huge, especially with energy efficiency.
But I guess I'm wondering, when you interact with clients, do you have sort of a checklist or something that you work down through to make sure you've covered the various aspects, or do you just say to the client, what do you want, and then they tell you what they want, and it might be based on some kind of romantic notion even, and then you say, well, that's fine, but you realize that, this is involved, and this is involved, and this is involved.
All right, well, I'll start. They get it all when they get an energy audit. I mean, we have an 8-page audit form. We go through everything on the list. And as far as the education at the time of the audit, we really the 2 points we hit every single time are stack effect and building envelope, because if you don't get that, the rest of it's, irrelevant. So they get it all, but then a piece of my job is really, sitting down when I bring the proposal back. I mean, a lot of contractors just email the proposals back and then wait, but I find it much more effective to go back, sit back at the kitchen table and go over it, line for line, and then really figure out what they are interested in moving forward with, which sometimes is motivated by cost savings and sometimes isn't. So you really need to, it depends on the homeowner.
I think you're right about people. I think we take for granted our base of knowledge of how buildings operate. And a lot of times I do educational venues where we have lay people come in and we're using language that is meaningless to them. We could be speaking a different language. So I liked Jen's analogies, of the wool sweater. So I think that's really important. Someone will be talking to a group of homeowners and they'll be using the lingo, and I'll say, do you know what that means? And they're like, no, I don't know what the heck she just said. So I think it's really, really important that we use language that is understandable, analogies that are very relatable, and so that they can like just the hats and boots. Again, it's like boom, they can instantly make a connection and oh, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. So I think it's really important when we do educate that we educate in a way that's very understandable and easy to get. And but in terms of your second point, people come in for different reasons and different scopes. It's sometimes they're not building, a brand new house. Sometimes they just want a new carpet or something like that. So yes, for me personally, it depends on the scope of the project, and my involvement is more narrow than someone like Jesse or Steve who have more encompassing, are managing every aspect or bigger parts.
I have a question. Yeah. Can I take moderator's privilege? Sure, I guess I was intrigued, Steve, by what you said about waiting for the client to come along who wants a net zero house. Right. And I know Jesse made the point, and I think this applies to everybody, that you're not selling green. You're not saying you should do X, Y, and Z. However, as the climate warms and as the urgency of sort of solving that problem gets bigger and more time sensitive and so on, do you think there's a way to say, I don't know, do an ad or something and say, I'm looking for somebody to do this experiment with. If you're looking to build a timber frame home, is that something that you've ever thought of? And I'm sorry to provoke, but
If I ever thought of that, I think any of us that are builders over the long haul, we sort of have this wish list of things we're going to build. Like I still want to build a steeple and I still want to build a covered bridge. I have worked on a covered bridge, but it wasn't my own project. So anyway, would I put an ad in for a net zero? Yeah, sure. Ideally it makes complete sense, and it's just that when the client comes to you with a set desire, you don't have to do all that convincing. The first rule of thumb about net zero is you got to have a net zero client. And if a client's got 3 teenage daughters, forget it. It's not going to happen. You guys really should go down to Nessie and listen to these guys talk, because they're funny. One guy said, he said, we're running out of net zero clients. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm talking about folks who have survived the Depression and take 1 bath a week. It's a lifestyle issue. Net zero for one person is not going to be for another. So this is a very vague concept. But you're right on the money. Maybe we should put ourselves out there more. Most builders, myself included, don't like to advertise much. I do advertise. I do use the web, but no, I never considered putting that out.
Or just to push it one more step, even just saying to somebody who has said, I've heard that your houses are super energy efficient, so I'd like to work with you on a project, and just saying, well, I don't know if this is of interest. You can throw it out the door if you want to, but have you ever thought about doing this? Because it's a dream of mine, and I'm trying to find somebody to do it with. It doesn't have to be you, but I'm just telling you that that's a discussion I'd like to have with somebody.
You make a very good point. I'll see if I can find one.
I think what you're talking about also is utilizing our networks. You know what I mean? We all have big networks, and sometimes we don't maximize that. So we could probably do a better job of using our social networks, using just all the different people that we come into contact. Like there's a whole bunch of people I just met, at the conference today that has just broadened my network. So, there's opportunity there. So it's not necessarily paying for an ad. It's just being more vocal and more communicative about our goals.
And also, we don't do any advertising. All of our leads people just come to me. I don't actually know where they come from sometimes, but, and one of the motivating factors is, my neighbor did this or, my father did this, and it's not back to anything rational like saving money. It's just, oh, they did it and I trust them and they said it was a good idea. So that's been another peculiar facet of all of this is, people want to do it because other people are doing it. So once you start building, especially in one area, you start getting a critical mass and then the ball keeps rolling. So hopefully it will continue.
I just wanted to add, the reason we do this is because it's fun. I love what I do. there's a lot of ways where it can get interesting, and it can be an interesting site. You always need a good connection with the clients. I mean, it's an intimate thing. You're making their dreams, and they're often hundreds of thousands of dollars, being put to that dream. And it's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of emotions, and it's like a lot. This is money that's worked really hard for, and I don't know. It can go in a lot of directions, but to me, bringing that green, bringing the options to them, in addition to just all the other aspects of doing this kind of work, is what makes it work for me.
If I have a level of trust with a person, I can get them to do a lot more than if they just come to me with a set of plans. They don't know me. They've gotten a recommendation, but what is the best way to establish that level of trust so that you can sell some of your ideas?
I think it just comes down to I'm not the right designer or the right consultant for everybody. And I'll recommend someone else who can do something similar that I know can do it, that might have a better connection. It's like it's a friendship. It's like it comes down to just chemistry, and hopefully there's enough people with enough chemistry that you can stay in business and stay busy.
And time, just like any relationship with, where you're building trust, is sometimes you might need to talk to that person on several occasions. They might, come and talk to you a little bit, and then, come again, and then finally they've reached that comfort level. Like, okay, I'm ready to pull the trigger on this now because I feel like I can trust you. So, it's not going to happen immediately. I have people that come in my showroom multiple times over 6 months, a year, until they're, have the money, or they feel good, or they're confident to move forward. So, but that is a good point. I think you're right, that when there is that level of trust, they're willing to kind of leverage out of their comfort zone a little bit more than if they don't have that. So that's a really, really good point.
You're acting as their guide, right?
Yeah. They have confidence in you.
And what you said earlier, just about listening. I mean, that's, when we first walk into a house, Justin's outside taking pictures, measuring the building, and I'm in there talking to the homeowner, but they know their house better than you are. You're spending 2 to 3 hours there. They've lived there sometimes for many decades. So it's, really just listening to what they have to say. And they know where the colder parts of their house is, and they know where they get icicle buildup. And if you just spend the time to, hear what they have to say, it makes a world of difference, as you get farther down the line. So, and also just respecting their home. This may be a house and it's a structure and it has a building envelope, but it's also, where they live. So just always keeping that in mind and just being, respectful, asking, we're used to tromping through the entire house, but, ask for permission before you go upstairs. Sometimes people are following right along with you. Other times they're just letting you do your thing. But, just in constant communication and listening, not shoving things down their throats.
I close there. Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And Steve had to leave early, but if any